Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's live Q&A session. My name is Marcy Melzer, and I am an intuitive speech and language pathologist. And every week I do a live Q&A session where I invite parents to join me and ask questions about your late talker. Maybe you have been in the process of evaluating methods. I have no idea what your question might be, but I get questions every week from parents who I do strategy sessions with, and I see people in my group and other groups. So I know that folks out there are curious, and I know that these sessions are great. So I see some folks are joining. Thanks so much for popping in. There's Joanne and Crystal and Dana and Shelly and Olivia. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today's Q&A session. If you have a question, please post it in the comments of this video and I will talk about it. So go ahead and do that. And while I'm waiting for some folks to pop in, I usually bring in a topic to get started with talking about. I love this format to be able to sort of be a little bit more exchanging, conversational with the folks that watch me, because it's important for me to be presenting information that is valuable to you, that are things that you are interested in wanting to know. So, hey, Shelly and Mary, thanks for saying hi. Let me take a little drink, got my tea going. Okay, so while I'm waiting for something to come in, any questions from parents, I wanted to talk a little bit about augmentative alternative communication systems, like sign language, picture systems, anything like that, that you know, is an alternative to using talking. Many clinicians, therapists, families choose to use augmentative or alternative communication when spoken words are difficult for kids. So they do move into using these tools as ways to facilitate language. And so a lot of parents, there's many different theories about it, and one of the questions that I saw posted in a group, so I'm going to sort of swipe this question as a way to sort of talk about this issue, because there's quite a lot of discussion around this topic of alternative communication. And so the question was that it was posted in an autism group, an autism parent group, who's been graciously allowing me to join in and learn from parents and learn what their questions are. So what the question was, this mom had posted that her child's speech therapist was not on board with her wanting to use a communication device. Like, she really wants her child's 2.5, and she really wanted her child, evidently she had a conversation with her speech therapist about using alternative communication, and the speech therapist kind of gave it a thumbs down. You know, that's sort of what I interpreted. And the mom was concerned because the mom was really interested in getting this system. So what popped into my head to be in exchange with this mom, and I didn't jump on it because I didn't want to call her out or make a note about any of that. But what it made me think about in my head was what would cause, because I also have very specific views on how to use alternative communication with late talkers. And I have moms in my program who are using alternative communication. Some of them are using PECs. Some of them are using rapid prompting method. Some of them are using signs. Some of them are using sort of a combination. In fact, I have one mom whose little guy is inventing his own. He's like picking up toys and starting to use them to communicate. So there is a definite place in the conversation for using alternative augmentative communication other than speech. And so what I definitely want to do is I'm going to do a whole video on the topic, and I see a few more people have joined me. Thanks for joining me on this live Q&A. I'm talking a little bit about alternative communication right now, but if you have a question about your child, don't hesitate to go ahead and pop it into the comments of this video. Okay, so back to it. So like I said, how I feel about using alternative communication with late talkers is just like I use any tool to facilitate language with late talking kids. So what usually happens with kids who are late talkers, you've heard me say this before. If you haven't seen me before, you're just jumping on. My name's Marcy Melzer. I'm an intuitive speech pathologist. I've been working in the field for 30 years with kids from 0 to 100. Even the kids who are 100 are kids. You're kids at all life, because I always have fun in the work that I do. So it's always like play. It's always fun. And the thing about this alternative communication that I'm talking about is sometimes parents feel like that's the thing to use to get their kiddo to start talking. However, it can sabotage, like it can come back in a negative way for some late talkers, because the thing about late talkers is they get very good at nonverbal communication because speech is hard. And the nonverbal communication that they get good at usually is made up themselves. They may learn from all the different things that they're learning. Maybe you're trying signs. Maybe they're pointing. Maybe they're bringing you things. Maybe they're pushing you. Maybe they're screaming. Maybe they're using behaviors like meltdowns. Maybe they're tugging on hair. Maybe they, all the different things that they're using to communicate. Those are all alternative communication methods. So anything that your child is using besides words to communicate, they're already using alternative communication systems. And so one of the theories is that because kids are good at using nonverbal language, if we give them a structured nonverbal way to communicate, they might actually glom onto that. And it's something everybody can understand, right? So when they start to use natural, or when they start to use this thing for communication, picture system, for example, or signs. Let's say they learn the sign for eat whenever they want to eat. Or they learn to hold their hand out, or they learn to say please, more, the few basic signs that they learn. Let's say they learn to say more, and because they said more, they got something, it worked really well, so now they say more for everything. Or let's say your child learned to say thank you, because every time you give them something, you say thank you, because you want them to learn to say thank you. So now they use thank you to ask you, which is a verb, which is actually a verbal, like a talking, but it's not really alternative communication. See, the thing is, your kids are going to pick what's easiest. And if all the things that they're using are working for you, teaching them another nonverbal system is just shifting from one nonverbal system to another nonverbal system. And my theory about it is, if you're going to be switching systems for your child, and your child can say words, like especially if they're using echolalia, or like if they're saying thank you to ask, or if they're asking for things with questions like, do you want a cookie, to get the cookie? If you're prompting them and they do say words sometimes, like if your child has the capability to produce speech, and you want to shift from your current nonverbal communication pattern into something that everybody can understand, my theory is, why don't we teach them speech? Right? Why are we teaching them another method if we can teach them to use speech? And so the best way to go about figuring out if your child can learn to speak is they have to meet certain criteria. They just have to be able to hear and say words, or even sounds. It doesn't take very many criteria for a child to be able to learn to say words. Even kids with apraxia, even kids with tongue tie, they're gonna try to learn, But as long as we understand why and what's going on that's causing your child to be late talking in the first place, then we overcome that, and then teaching verbal speech is easy. So if your child has a tongue tie and they can't move their tongue, you have to fix that tongue tie, but then you can teach them natural language. If your child had ear infections and they couldn't hear for a while and you fix the ear infections, then you can teach them verbal language. So it doesn't make sense to sort of teach something else unless it's totally necessary. And that's where some alternative systems are really necessary. So if your child can't hear and hearing is inconsistent for them because of glue ear, or they can't hear because of a hearing loss, then we get them hearing the best they can. And then you might have to learn sign language. You might have to learn a computer system. Your child might have to learn writing. But just because your child learned those things first and they're working for them to communicate doesn't mean that you can't shift again over to verbal speech, but it is a shift. So maybe you shifted from nonverbal communication like meltdowns and tantrums, which is a nonverbal communication, into using sign language or PECs, which represents language, is understood by more people. You know, everybody who sees what the juice looks like and understands what that is and has assets, right, is trying to sign, but the internet's shaky. Kate's trying to sign on. Sorry. So anyway, the thing is, if you have a question, sorry, just pop it on. Sorry, I saw somebody. Kate, this is the meeting. This is the Q&A for everybody on all of my groups. It's not on my individual, the people in my Waves of Communication community. I do my meeting at noon, and that will be in our regular off the Facebook platform. Sorry, just wanted to jump in and say that just so Kate jumped in. I don't have any more questions coming in, so I'm just watching the feed. So anyway, sorry, got distracted there for a second. I'm going to take the opportunity to have a drink. Spilling tea on myself. Okay, everybody. So like I said, when you're looking at alternative communication systems, you have to figure out what purpose do they serve for you. If they're providing an alternative to what's going on now, that is a progression towards language that other people can understand, that's great. But make sure that that's not the final step for you, okay? Because if you do feel like verbal speech is something that you want to facilitate for your child, it still is a process for you to move out of using that nonverbal communication system, like the iPad system or whatever, into verbal speech. And so what I do in my program is I help parents make the shift from whatever is the current now. And in many parents, it is a whole combination of things that are alternative to speech. And it happens because you have to know what your kiddo wants. And the older they get, the more complicated it is to try to read their mind, to figure it out. When they're babies, even when they're 2, it's pretty easy to understand what they want. Like, you know, there's only so many things that they've been exposed to in life that they could possibly want to choose from, and you know what they liked before, what they didn't like, or what kind of response you had previously, and you keep that in your data bank. And what happens is increasingly it becomes on the parent to be the device, the interpreter device for the child, because they're communicating with behavior. You're understanding what they want, guessing, watching, knowing what you know before, all of that, and then moving into using a structured speech. You know, many parents decide to or train their kids in that structured nonverbal, like signs or picture systems, or the iPad systems, you know, the ones that you touch the picture, it's still picture, you just don't exchange it, you just touch it and the iPad speaks it, things like that. What happens is, you know, a lot of parents get that system going, right? And kids love it because they think it's easier than talking. So they start to use a word, it works really great, and then that exchange-based communication, your child learns how to communicate with that exchange. Let's see, Joanne says, Joanne, who joins me every week now, thanks for Joanne. What Marcy is stating is true. We've used many of these methods she's talked about. Takes dedication and perseverance and a lot of love, but it works. Our daughter is now 9 and using verbal communication. Right. So in Joanne's case, it's very interesting because Joanne's little girl, who's not so little anymore now, she's 9, still a little girl. But I've just this week been talking to a lot of parents of kids who are 9 years old. In fact, I talked today to a gal who has a 10-year-old. Who's not using verbal speech like Joanne is, like Joanne's daughter is, because what Joanne did was realize when those systems became limiting. And so if you are considering using an alternative communication system, or if you are trying one now, so if you're in the middle of it, if you've been given a system by your therapist, if you're investigating a system, if whatever, what I recommend for you to do is, that you get, really understanding how it's working for you, if it's working for you. Because if it's a struggle to use this nonverbal communication system, and it's a struggle for your child to use words, then I posit to you, which struggle do you want to take on? Like, which thing do you want to do? And also consider the method you've been given to investigate and teach that child. So if it turns out that you are using a picture system, but it's becoming prohibitive, like you've got pictures all over your house, or the book's too heavy, or there's a lot of words, or you find that it's working at the school and not at the house, that's not a system that's going to sustain for your child, right? If your child's using an iPad system, but it's still not functional in your household, right? Those things, if you're trying to prompt for words like you can't have the cookies till you say cookies kind of thing, and that's not working, it's not fun, that's when you need a new strategy. You need to shift your strategy, because if it isn't fun, it isn't fun, and your child's not going to buy in. You're never going to be able to pressure your child into communication. You know this. As soon as you come at them with the learning, they go running the other direction. If that's happening to you, then you have to change, because your child's not going to change their attitude about it until you change how you're presenting that situation. And every family is different. That's why in my program, everybody gets a custom plan. All right, I've got a few more things here. Kate made it back. Hi, Kate. All right, and Priyas here. Priyas says, my son's saying 5, 6, and when I say 7, he says 8 sometimes, but he keeps repeating these numbers meaninglessly. I think he is scripting. How do I handle this? Encourage him or not? So, Priya, your little guy is just starting to use words. So when kids first start to practice, they're going to say the words they know a lot. And it seems like it's scripting or repetitive or whatever. It's only really, true echolalia if your child's using it to communicate. But if your child's a new talker, I would say they're still late, but they're just getting into starting to use words like Priya's little guy, you're going to want to encourage all the talking you get, but remember what I always talk about, recasting. So we always want to use in language facilitation the right words the right way at the right time. So if your child is needing to, say those words over and over again, or if they are, he probably really likes this whole counting sequence game that you have. And he's made up his own rules where he only says the 8. He waits for you to say the 5, 6, 7, 8. My suggestion with you is model the whole string of words. Don't stop. Don't hesitate. That's a prompt. And he's waiting for you to do the prompt. And that's what he thinks the game is. He doesn't understand that all of those numbers are necessary when you count to 10, because right now counting to 10 is just something fun that you're doing together. So the first thing I have about it is limit your expectations, Priya, and just model, and whatever he's not saying, you just fill in and say, and encourage him to say it with you, and then take his turn to try to do it on his own. So that would help. So always encourage all that talking. The scripting is great. So Joanne says about augmentative systems, use the system the speech therapist wishes plus verbal communication. The key is both, and small sentences, slow and small words. Joanne's right. Okay, Shelly, I was considering a device for my son, but I'm having second thoughts about it now. Okay, so Shelly, like I said, the thing to consider about a device is how do you feel about implementing it? Because just like Joanne says, it takes work. Any new system that you're going to implement with your child takes you as the parent to implement that system. Period. End of. 100%. You're the ones that teach your kids everything. And so think about, do you want, as a parent, to spend your energy, because it's a lot of energy that goes into teaching these systems, and do you want to spend your energy teaching a nonverbal system when potentially you could be teaching your child to use verbal speech, like Joanne says? And if you don't think, like if your child's already saying words, I would never use an alternative device. If your child is already saying some words at all, I wouldn't go there at all. I'd avoid it 100%, because you absolutely can teach your child to use words. And like I said, all the energy you would put into teaching the nonverbal speech could go towards teaching natural verbal language. With language facilitation, if you want to know how to do that, I can teach you exactly how to do it, no matter how old your child is. The parents in my program have kids who are under 2 and over 9. So it's all working for all of them, because they're using what they have in their home. They already have what's going on, just like Joanne said. If you're using a system, great. If you need coaching in how to work out of that system into verbal speech, that's what I do. All right, so let's see here. Hi, such good info. Thank you, Kataya. Thank you for saying that. And Shelly says, my son's been discharged from speech and language therapy in the UK. They say they can't help him. Shelly, maybe it's because they can't. Maybe it's because it's you that needs to help him. And I can teach you how to do it. The parents in my program have been like you. They sort of hit the wall. If their kids are doing work and talking for whenever the speech therapist did, that means your child is smart enough to learn how to answer all the test questions the speech therapist had, how to get to do all of that stuff. But if you're watching this video, you're probably not getting the kind of speech and language that you think you want to get. And I promise you, parents are the only ones to teach them. So Shelly, I highly recommend that you take a look at my website and look at my free class. And if it resonates with you and you are interested in doing a program, go ahead and jump on to a strategy session with me. And I can tell you exactly how it'll work for you before you make your investments. So, you know, I think especially people who run out of ideas if you don't have therapy in your country, in your area. Let's say you move to a new place, and, you know, in places other than the US, we're spoiled here. We have early intervention systems and government money and Medicare and insurance and Medicaid and things like that. In other countries, you don't have all that. But I have families in 10 different countries. This is how I know. I have parents in the UK, I have parents in Australia, I have parents in Sweden, and all of them are teaching their kids to communicate, many of them bilingually. So I think that you definitely, Shelly, can get them talking. You can. You definitely can. All right, Chelsea says, my child can sing songs when listening to them and can quote things off movies while watching the movie. Very nice. But when those things are not on, he doesn't. If it wasn't super simple songs or some movies, I wouldn't know he could even say some things. Any advice? So Chelsea, your child has learned to use language from those video presentations, right? So that's where he's learned it, like you wouldn't even know. So what that tells me, Chelsea, is that he is listening to those things more than he is listening to you. Because even if you're trying to teach him words, because, you know, when you're trying to teach him words, you know, he's not learning them from you, and the things that he is saying, he really likes it. So that whole idea of it being fun and language being interesting and exciting for him to do, that's what you need to be able to shift and do, Shelley. Those are the kinds of strategies that you would get in my program. I would counsel you on, you know, modifying the communication that he is using. Because if he's not saying words, if the only words he's saying are from super simple songs, which I love, by the way, but they are just a way to learn how to sing super simple songs if you watch them over and over again. And when you do natural language facilitation, you do this intervention from the time you get your baby up in the morning to the time you put him to bed at night, no matter how old they are. Because you should be doing facilitation. You're probably missing many, many, many opportunities throughout your day. While you're getting dressed, are you facilitating language? While you're eating, are you facilitating language? While you're playing toys together, are you facilitating language? Is your child spending more time on the iPad watching super simple songs than he is listening to you do really good, nice language modeling throughout your day? That's probably what's going on in your case, and you might be really stuck in that communication situation, Chelsea. So what I specialize in is helping parents get unstuck from that situation and learn how, because if he's not using that words to communicate, then he's using other things. So if he's only vocalizing, Shelley, at the moment, you can do it. You can still do it. So, yep. So, Chelsea, you definitely need to work on modeling the right words the right way, the right time. Yep. Get those strategies to get him to focus and understand your language and make your language just as fun and interesting. And I can teach you how to do that. That's what I specialize in. That's one of those two things. Tablet use and poor attention to parents are the number one strategies that I help parents coach through, because they're the toughest things to do, because those are the two things that keep you stuck in nonverbal communication. All right, so let's say Shelley, he has autism and only vocalizes at the moment, but having autism doesn't tell me why he's late talking. I need to know more about his experiences and what's going on that stopped him from learning language naturally in the first place. What caused him to be late talking? Just autism. With 1 in 40 children being diagnosed with autism, just saying autism doesn't help. I have to know more about the kinds of things that are going on. So that's why every family is different, because I can have 10 families contact me and they all say their kids have autism, and they can have 100% different situations in their household. Some might have just one child. Some might have multiple children. Some might have multiple children who have autism diagnoses. So the thing is, every family is different, and a mom who's facilitating language with her own single child is a lot different than a mom who's facilitating language with, 4 children, which I have in my program, both. So everyone's different. You really need to understand. Joanne says the best way I can describe what we did is read to the child short stories, pictures, describe the world around them, use motion in songs, dance in mirrors. All that stuff is fab. All of those things are wonderful, Joanne. It's a lot of work, but talk, describe everything, explain what's going on around them. That's the right words the right way at the right time. That's what Joanne's talking about, is necessary for you to do it. So, yeah, so thanks for joining me, Joanne. And let's see, Haley says, my son is 4, is verbal, had a lot of ear infections leading to tubes last summer and speech therapy sessions, fluid so he couldn't hear, right? Very number one reason for late talking, Haley. His doctor wants to turn it to autism and get tested. He does speak, just not much sentences. Like Chelsea and Pri says, he repeats what he hears. Speech, I believe, has helped so much to make him verbal, and he needs more time to progress. Your thoughts? So, yeah, the kids who have fluid, especially intermittent hearing loss due to fluid, are very, very commonly given autism diagnoses because there's lots of things that look like autism in kids with fluid issues in their ears. They all look like autism. Because if you diagnose autism based on behaviors and observations, which is what most people do, then kids who have ear fluid exhibit enough of them to get a diagnosis, let's say, even if it's high functioning, even if kids are saying words. So could you go and get an autism diagnosis? Very likely, yes. My question for you is why? So if you want to get an autism diagnosis for funding, what is that funding paying for? If you want your child to learn to use natural language, which is why you're potentially watching this video, and you want your child to learn to speak clearly now that he's got tubes, now that he's engaging, with you, and you want to learn how to do that, an autism diagnosis is not necessary. You can learn how to do that from me or, from a speech therapist who's skilled in coaching parents. So, you don't need an autism diagnosis to work with a speech pathologist at all. So that would be my first thing. I mean, I'm not really sure why you need an autism diagnosis. Now, that being said, if you live in Florida, you can use your autism diagnosis to potentially apply for scholarship money that will pay for things like therapy or hippotherapy, ABA, all kinds of things, even devices. So many parents are getting that autism diagnosis to apply for funding to do those things. I just don't think most people who get an autism diagnosis are encouraged very quickly to do ABA therapy. And that's just what I like to avoid for parents. So as far as autism diagnosis and my thoughts, there they are. As far as starting immediately doing language facilitation to help your child learn to use communication, that's what you should be doing. If you're not, like Joanne says, using the right words, the right way, the right time, and doing that in your home all the time, because your child has a lot of time to make up for. If he just got tubes a year ago, his first, potentially you don't even know how long he wasn't hearing well. And so he missed hearing speech well. And it's just kind of like I told the other mom, attention to hearing verbal speech is what kids need in order to be able to learn to use natural language that they themselves pull out of their own body and not scripted off of something someone taught them. So like if your child's learning to use words from a therapist, or if they're learning to exchange pictures or use sign language or, any of those other things, those are all systems in themselves. But natural verbal speech in the language of your choice is something that kids have to learn from hearing people speak that language. Hearing and seeing people speak that language. And if you can't see, you have to be able to hear well. If you can't hear well, you have to be able to see very well, to be able to get verbal speech. We're talking verbal speech, right? So, all right, so that's it. Shelly says, thanks for your advice. I'll message you and explain my son's situation. Absolutely. If you have more questions about what's going on, I highly advise you to contact me for a strategy session. If you're interested in wondering how this program can work for you and you're prepared to make an investment in getting a lifetime program for your child. I don't work in session-by-session speech therapy, just to let you know. I have a lifetime program because language development is a lifetime effort. And I give parents the training and tools and strategies and support and empowerment you need to make it happen in my lifetime program. And you can find out all about the costs, all about everything on my website at wavesofcommunication.com. So there you go. Really quick question, one more before I jump off of here. How to stop echolalia. My son is 3.5, keeps repeating things. He's learning functional language, but still keeps on saying useless things. That's some very specific strategies that you're going to need to help transition out of echolalia, because echolalia is technically its own system. And just like I had said before, if you're just joining me now, you're going to need very specific strategies because of how your child is using that echolalia, because it's not the same for every child. Just because a child repeats things over and over again doesn't mean that they're using it for communication with you. It could be for pleasure, it could be for stimming, it could be for different reasons, and we need to understand in your circumstance why that's happening to help you move out of it. If your child is already been doing this scripting for a while, then it's already a habit, right, that your child has, that if it's something that you want to change, you need to teach your child how to work from that habit in a way that's comfortable for your child. It's just like I tell parents, if I was addicted to donuts, just like I was addicted to stimming and echolalia, and you said, nope, you can't do that anymore, cold turkey, I would have so much anxiety. But if you showed me how to use that echolalia in a way that is communication that is easier for you, that makes more sense to other people, and transitions into language and helps me feel better about using it rather than stopping it cold, then you're going to have better buy-in from your child to move from it. So Sherma, you need to have the strategies to help your child move from echolalia, use it as communication, understand what it is, and translate it into natural speech. So that's how you're going to do that. All right, everybody. It's been almost 40 minutes on this live Q&A. Thank you so much for your questions today. I will be back next week with another live Q&A session. But if in the meantime you have questions about your child and you want to reach out to me, my website, Waves of Communication, is a great way to do that. You can also send me a message here on Facebook. And I highly encourage you to join my group, Language Facilitation Resources for Parents, where I put videos in there weekly that have very specific strategies to teach you how to incorporate language facilitation, kind of similar to the things that Joanne was talking about. I give you strategies exactly how to do that with your kiddo. And if you are ready to get going and get serious about this and get your plan, like the parents in my program, See Real Language, you can see new talking within a week. Most of the kids do start to use language really fast, especially if they're older than 3. If they're already using words for other things, you can teach them how to use language very quickly in your home by giving up all those alternative systems and shifting your mind and your child's mind into natural verbal language. And that's how you do it. Seems like it's easy, but it is a lot of work. But I do make it easy for you. I do make the strategies so easy that you can incorporate them. I tell them while you're unloading groceries from the car full of kids, you should be able to facilitate language. It should be that easy and fit that seamlessly into your house. And that's why the parents in my program are seeing such great improvement, because they are doing just that. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining me today. If you're watching this on YouTube as the replay, you can catch these live Q&A sessions on Facebook every week. And I do appreciate you watching this video. I appreciate you giving me all the shares with your friends and your groups or whatever, and all of the subscribes if you're watching me on YouTube. Please subscribe to my channel. It helps these videos get out to other people, and it will help you know every time I upload a new video. 2 or 3 every week uploaded to YouTube. And there's more than 100 videos on my YouTube channel. So if this is the first one you've watched and you want to see other episodes, my YouTube channel is the place to go. It's all split into categories for you. It's like a course in itself, my YouTube channel. Check it out. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining me, and I will see you all on my next live video.